All right. I told you last week that we were finishing up the church after COVID study, and we did. Each of those weeks, if you go back, they're all on YouTube. If you want to go back, if you've missed any of them or you missed all of them, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can watch sessions 1 through 6. And every one of them are about choices: choose life or death, choose boredom or fun or joy, choose isolation or community, and on, showing us what a healthy church is. So, in this sort of a bonus session, I want to explore what should have been a whole study by itself, but the book 4D Impact, Ulu Brown. I didn't do a whole long study because I felt like it'd be just too much. We need to move on to some other subjects. In fact, we're going to move on to Jonah. But wanted to give you some thoughts of a book I read right after I finished this study, and this book's brand new. Ulu Brown is a pastor, a Methodist pastor in Atlanta, a new church start, and I've heard him preach on at a festival. It's just amazing. But anyway, in his book, everything I'm going to give you is not is my think is his thinking, his book, what he has shared with my processing it. So I'm not going to claim these themes. These are Ulu Brown's themes that spoke to me in the book. So I'm basically outlining the book, but I'm also going to kind of sort of try to connect it to Randolph Memorial Baptist. Okay, so first thing I want to say is that as we look at it, I know you're like me. You're tired of hearing the term the new normal. Interesting enough, the book talks about that before COVID. This was written like just recently, right? It came out right as COVID was taking off. In fact, the copyright date was last year. Came out at the end of last year. So he had no clue. But he's talking about how church has changed, just in general, that church is changing. Church is always changing. In our history, folks, it's always been changing. He mentioned that every 7 seconds the world shifts. After COVID, it may be every 2 seconds. Years ago, I read a book by that talked about how the Earth is flat because of technology. You know, it used to be if I was here and you were in France, we might have to write a letter, maybe a phone call. But now with the internet and instant access and zooming and technology, the world is flat. Like the whole world, it's almost like it's gotten smaller. We're all connected. This virus shows us that. This virus has spread so fast because the world is so connected. And then shutting us down has been difficult because when one place shuts down, it impacts everything else. So the church is in that. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago, recently, how chains like Toys R Us that closed, that the two reasons they closed were competition and debt. And now that we're moving out of COVID, well, we're not out of COVID, we're in the middle of COVID, but we're getting out of our house more. We're also seeing a lot of businesses. I could read you a whole list of businesses that are either going bankrupt or completely closing, restaurants and others. Many of them were already struggling before this economic downturn caused by a virus, but this has just sped up that process. And many of them had the same challenges: competition. There was just so many places selling T-shirts, so many places with buffets, so many places selling hamburgers that it's a tough market, and you got to be at the top of your game because if you're not, they'll go somewhere else. And then debt, meaning they owe so much money that, of course, with the COVID shutdown, they were already on razor thin margins or they were borrowing money to pay the bills, and this hit, and they folded. So the church in the 21st century is dealing with that as well because the church, I'm not competing with the Methodists and the Presbyterians or Madison Heights Baptist or, it's not that. The competition is just church in general now at 11 o'clock is not the only time, the only thing that people can do at 11 o'clock on a Sunday. People have Netflix and they could watch it for a million years. They can go anywhere in the world. 11 is in the middle of a Sunday, which is to many people is just another day of the weekend. And in the very middle of it, you want everybody to stop and come to church. And they're thinking, well, if I do that, what is that going to, how's that going to change my life? How is it something I want to invest in? And then of course you've got travel sports and I'm not picking on anybody that does these things. I'm just saying there's so much more going on. Our world is busier than ever that it becomes a challenge for churches. And then, of course, debt. Churches own buildings and structures that just cost a fortune to build and make and to maintain, the institution of denominations and religious life in general. So with that in mind, this Ulu Brown has 4 different areas that we're going to talk about. 4 areas that will determine the future of churches today. And they are technology, hospitality, worship, and systems. So join me as we look at those 4 things and we're going to just, I mean, these are going to just be brief little hits. Again, I just want these to be thinking, to create conversation starters in your thoughts, and to encourage you to think about as we as a church are moving forward. So let's get started. Okay, I am sitting in the sound booth. Let me show you. Here we are. Some of you know this area, and some of you have never sat in this area. This is the place where technology is the biggest, because this is what controls the technology of our sanctuary, at least. When I first started preaching, and I'm not that old, but when I first started preaching in Kentucky, you were fortunate. The biggest technology a sanctuary had were microphones, right? And we generally had, some churches I preached in when I first started didn't even have microphones. So you'd go into a small country church and you just preach from the pulpit, and then they sometimes would have a tiny little sound system that maybe the singer would have one microphone, the choir wasn't mic'd, the piano wasn't mic'd, you'd have an organ, but you really did not have technology. And then some might have a lapel for the preacher, or they'd have a microphone, and some of the preachers were loud, so they didn't even want to use a microphone. And then and I can remember several churches, including my home church, that the sound system was behind the pulpit. You just flip on the switch, and that was about it. And then we started going to churches that would have them, and then they would do cassette tapes and on and on. So this first piece, technology, it has moved very fast, and it's moving faster. The thing we've noticed during this whole crisis that we just went through is that technology has been a lifesaver for Randolph Memorial. I mean, even 10 years ago, when I first came 13 years ago, we had technology. This church has always been very much interested in technology, don't get me wrong. But the technology of the world wasn't to the point where it is now, that it would not have been as easy as it is now to have an online worship service, or what I'm doing right now with you. I mean, think about it. The majority of what we've done since March 15th has been on my cell phone. And we've had a camcorder, and we've had, and now we've bought a new camera, a little camera to use for Sundays, but a majority has been my cell phone, a tripod, first a borrowed tripod, and then we got a tripod, and my wife being my camera operator. I mean, on one hand, you're like, wow, but on the other hand, you're like, isn't it amazing we can do that? And many of you've submitted videos through your cell phones and on and on. So it's amazing, and we're living in a blessed time. There's so much out there we can do, but before March 15th, we were just using a bit of it, and now we have really done a lot of it. Maybe some of you think we've done too much, but I mean, we've got a YouTube channel now, we've got Facebook, we are doing more and more, and so I would say to us that as we continue to be the church God has called us to be, it's not an option. Now, don't get me wrong, technology is never a substitute for people. So I cannot wait to be back in this church with everybody. Sunday was wonderful the last few weeks, being able to be with other people in worship, knowing though that more than half our congregation couldn't be here, and I understand that, and so technology connects. So in the future, let me tell you, I don't know all the technological things that we're going to have to work on, but we're going to have to work on it and continue to grow it. It's going to be a daily, consistent, constant addressing need. So I can see that when COVID is in the history books, we will gather in person and we will worship, but we'll be online so that you can watch when you travel, when you're not. Remember I talked about competition? We can whine all day long about, well, I wish everybody would come to worship with us. And I do that. Believe me, as a preacher, we always do that. I wish everybody could come. But I realize you travel. I mean, I travel on vacation. So I realize that the world is busy. And so here's the thing. In the summer months, when people are gone, wouldn't it be awesome to say, well, I'm gone for 2 weeks, but I can watch my worship service and worship while I'm gone. And it makes it easier that when you come back, to just come right back to it. And it will be a consistent presence in our lives. And so I don't want to guilt you. I want to be able to connect with you. So I can see that. But online worship is not just it. I mean, Zoom has, yes, we'll have committees that meet in person. I'm proud of the nominating committee, stewardship, and deacons who have used technology. And we want to be back in person. But I can see a committee. Imagine a committee where you have 6 people and 2 of them are traveling. And so you put the laptop in the middle of the conference table and they Zoom in while everybody else is there so that we can all be there to share and nobody's left out. It's pretty cool. We may have some teams where everybody's online, or maybe not every month, but some of the projects could just be done on a Zoom meeting. That makes sense. Bible studies, teaching Bible studies on Zoom for people who can't be here on Sunday morning. I'm doing that right now with 2 classes, Sunday school and a new class I've created. But that, or even short modules or maybe Wednesday night, when I do a Wednesday night Bible study when this is over, we're streaming it for people at home, recording it, but also maybe reteaching it on a Zoom channel so that you could have a smaller group studying it for conversation. Creating videos. I can't wait for VBS to be back in the building next year, but promo videos and adding pieces that they can do follow-up after it's over. A couple of episodes, sessions, or things that they could do when VBS is over as follow-up. The sky's the limits. But let me say, technology is the first piece that we will have to make sure that we do not leave out. It is an opportunity, and there are obstacles if we don't do it, and there's obstacles to do it because it's going to take money, it's going to take time and training. But we can't form a committee and say in 1 year we're going to start using technology. We got to do it, and as we go, keep doing it. So technology is the number one thing that the church in the 21st century is going to have to continue to get better, and Randolph is going to keep at it. Okay, so after technology comes the next piece, hospitality. I'm sitting in the front entrance of our church. This is the first line of greeting that the folks get when they come into the building on a Sunday morning. And so when we think of hospitality, we often think of welcoming, which is true, and we think of how we welcome people as they come into the church, which is true. Now, it actually begins in the parking lot. When folks get out of their car, a church needs a clean and efficient parking lot. Our greeters are there to help if folks as they get to the church, and it's important we have a good impression as they come into the building. But really, it doesn't start in the parking lot. Hospitality really starts in our lives. We represent Christ, and if we're a member of Randolph Memorial, we represent our local church. And so when people meet us, we are the first view that someone has of God and our church. And so we need to be the type of people that are welcoming in every area of life. But then, of course, as people come into the church, they are looking for welcoming, a church that is welcoming them. 1 Corinthians 13 tells us that love is the greatest gift, and people are looking for that. We have a divided and fractured world. Everybody is dividing over everything. And so the church needs to be the one place where people feel safe and wanted and needed, and it's a sanctuary. That's the word sanctuary. Our world today, hospitality is a big topic. In careers, there are careers of hospitality directors, and the idea of of having hospitality is everywhere, and the church needs to be big on it. It needs to be like leading the way. Hospitality has been defined by Ulu Brown in this book as a biblical practice that forces the heart to see the true value of people and love them deeply. Our heart must see people and love them. That's why we're hospitable. If we don't like people, we're not going to have hospitality. Acts chapter 4 tells us, in the Bible, tells us that gives us a snapshot of the early Christian church when it says, the community of believers was one in heart and mind. None of them would say, this is mine, about any of their possessions, but held everything in common. The apostles continued to bear powerful witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and an abundance of grace was at work among them. There were no needy people among them. Those who owned properties or houses would sell them, bring the proceeds from the sales, and place them in the care and under the authority of the apostles. Then it was distributed to anyone who was in need. So you see right there, the church was a church that was one in heart and mind. Yes, they were all unique individual people with their own gifts and talents. The Bible talks about how we all have gifts of the Spirit. We're all different, backgrounds, everything. The early church was made of different backgrounds, different origins. But when they came together, they were in one heart and mind. And they worked for the common good, looking for people who are in need, not being selfish. That's hospitality. That's what we need. You know, Jesus told us in Matthew 25, verses 44 through 45, I assure you, he says, people said, then they will reply, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and didn't do anything to help you? Then he will answer, I assure you, when you haven't done it for one of the least of these, you haven't done it for me. Jesus expects us to have hospitality, to be a welcoming people. And that means that all people are welcome, worthy, and they have a place. All people are welcome. That as they come, we are focusing on relationships. We're not focusing on we got to get another member. When someone visits the church, it's not about just getting members so we can get offerings so we can have a bigger building. That's a terrible way of thinking of church, and it's not how we think of church. But people sometimes accuse churches of being that way. No, we care about relationships. We care about individuals and their families and their friendships, and we care about you. And that means you've got to be welcomed and you've got to be wanted when you come. Jesus did this for folks that other people didn't even want to welcome. And the church needs to be welcoming of all people. But welcoming also means that we see all people are worthy. That it's not just like, yeah, you can come, but you need to sit over here and you sit over here. Or even make people feel that way. We see people as worthy. Yeah, we're all sinners. The Bible says all have sinned and come short of God's glory. But it did say all of us. So that means nobody is better than the other. We're all people. But that Jesus, through his love and grace is an undeserved gift, makes us all worthy, makes us all of value. Even though we're sinners, God created us. The Bible tells us in the very beginning that God created the heavens and the earth. And so if God created us, we are of worth. We're a precious treasure that God loves. And so we need to practice extreme hospitality, because what we need to do is to see that all people are welcome, all people are worthy, and that means we have a place for people, that they can come here and they're wanted to be here. There's an idea in a lot of writings that talks about how people need a third place. They got school or work and they have home. But people like a third place. It's just something within us. And I think of that old show Cheers, where everybody knows your name and Sam welcomes them into that bar up in the north. But in all reality, what that show, that sitcom was showing was that people are looking for another place. It may be a club, an organization, something that they're a part of. And sometimes we have 4, 5, and 6 places. But they want something outside of work and home. They want an identity with something. And the church becomes a community that sometimes becomes more valuable than any other community we can belong to. So as you think about hospitality, we need to think about the way we use our space, this building we're in. Everything from the bathrooms to the entrance to the hallways. We need to make sure the signs are visible, that you can find your way around, that it's not complicated to get, that people are there to greet you personally, and we need to help people if they are looking for the nursery or the bathroom. We also need to that's why we have the safety team. That's why we have ushers. It's why during this COVID time, as we have a 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock service, you as volunteers are stepping up and spraying the pews and cleaning them and getting it ready. That says that you want this space to be for people to be safe. You want people to feel able to worship here, people to be able to be here. Visibility, it's why we want our sign on the road. We want it lit up at night. We want people to know. We want everything to say, this is a place that's welcoming you. You can call it marketing, but the truth is we are, in a sense, marketing. In a sense, we are wanting this welcome message not just to be when you walk on the property. We want it to be out there, that we are a witness, promoting this community of faith to people that may be looking and needing and desiring community and needing God. A big piece of this is worship, and I'm going to save that for our third piece, but keep that in mind. So first, technology, and then second, it's going to be about hospitality. All right, we're ready for number 3. Let's go. I have literally the best seat in the house every Sunday morning. Well, the choir does too. Those of us up here, we get to see out there, and we get to see people doing their worship or worshiping with us. We get to see you as you experience God, and it's a very special, it's an honor. And so as we think about the 3 pieces, technology, hospitality, worship is the third piece. And you may say, but churches do Bible study, and we do fellowship, we do all these things. I know that, and it's all important. But worship is where we all come together. Sunday school or Bible studies or small groups, whatever a church has, you're all divided, youth, children, adults. But worship's where the body comes together. It's the one thing that is the unifying piece. And it is the most prominent and most visible of a church. If you only do one thing, chances are you'll be worship. We hope you'll do more and get involved in the life of the church, but worship is also the first entry. Way back in the Stone Ages when I first started, when I was growing up in church, Sunday school was kind of an invitational piece. Sunday school was like an outreach arm, and it was bringing people into a class and all that. But nowadays, people are much more private. I think. And so they're not apt to come to a Sunday school class necessarily. They come to worship first. Then they'll try out a Bible study. But they come to worship first. This is the piece where people experiment with congregations. When you're looking for a new church home, what do? You visit worship services. Even the word service, Ulu Brown mentions, says maybe ought to be rethought. He says service is like something you're, like a providing on this particular program or event. He says in his church he would prefer the word worship experience. And so they call it the worship experience. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should say 9 o'clock, worship experience. 11 o'clock, worship experience. Because you're going to experience something. It's going to be an active thing. In fact, worship is a verb. It's an action. It's what we do. We don't come to a building. We come to do something in the building. He talks a lot in the book about it, and there's lots of cool concepts in there, and I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to make this video too long. But I do like all of the things that he said, because what he does is he takes the idea of a worship service, not to say there's a cookie cutter mold, like, okay, if you want to grow your church, make your worship service fit this list. That doesn't make sense. The reality is worship services are going to be different. Different styles of music, different locations, culture plays into it, all kinds of things. But our worship needs to be inviting. We don't need it to be like it's a bunch of rules. It's a complicated thing that when people come, they're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know when to stand, when to sit. We need to make sure that we give clear instructions when it's time to stand and sit, clear instructions that we're going to read in unison. We need to make sure the language we use is understandable and that it's not like a club with these closed rules that people don't understand what we're talking about. We need to make sure that we're explaining ourselves, but that everything we're doing is welcoming and so that you feel a part of it and you want to be there. And I think that's really important. I want to say this, and then we'll move on to our fourth topic. Worship is vital, too, because it is the way we connect to God and to one another. It's transformative. It changes our lives, and it's valuable. And I know sitting up here that worship for all of us, it can be that there are different pieces of worship that speak to us differently. When I say worship, some of you immediately think of the sermon. Others of you immediately think of communion or baptism. Others think of music. Probably most people think of music when you think of worship. And that, in historically, the divisive part of worship in church life has been music. Churches years ago, 20 years ago, the worship wars, they called them, as people argued about what style of music to use in a worship service. Some said, we've just got to go contemporary. People need to hear what's on the radio. Others said, no, we need to do traditional so we can carry on the traditions that have come before us. Others say it needs to be a style that fits the culture we're in. And those debates really haven't gone away necessarily, though they may not be quite as hot as that. But I think they miss something. The point and the purpose of worship is to connect people to God and connect people to one another. And it is something we do. It's a verb. It's a way we are experiencing God as a community. So anything that hinders that, we need to talk about. And anything that will help that, we need to talk about. And we don't need to get opinion and preference mixed in the bunch. I mean, if I said it needs to sound like it sounds on the radio, the next question would be, well, what do you listen to when you listen to the radio? Country, music, Western, gospel? Or do you even listen to the radio? Some people don't. I don't listen to the radio. I couldn't tell you what radio stations are around here. What? Do you not like music, Derek? You know me better than that. I love music, and I listen to music in my car and at home all the time. But I listen to it on my device that I'm taping this on, and I listen to it on my Apple Music. I belong to the Apple Music thing, and I've got tens of thousands of songs at any moment, and I can listen to whatever I want, whenever I want, in my car, in my earphones, while I'm around the house. And I don't listen to one genre. I don't listen to one style. I also don't listen to just music. I listen to podcasts and educational, news, humor, you name it. I listen to a lot of stuff. So for me, I think that's what most people do. Most people don't listen to one genre. Most people don't listen to one style. I think that, to me, worship, instead of just playing all Celtic or all country or all whatever, I think being almost like a sample mix, playing a variety, so that when you come to church, it's never always the same thing. What we're going to do, A, B, C. We're going to only hear this kind of music, where there's a variety. So, and it comes from the gifts of the people. We all have gifts. So if there's someone in our church who's a gifted violinist, there ought to be a violin in worship. If you have someone in the church who's a gifted actor, then they ought to use drama. and then be developing new things. But it needs to be diverse. I want to know that it's all intentional. It's not a variety show, but it's intentional to help us connect to God and one another, but that it's also coming from the gifts and the abilities and the talents of the people that we have with us, so that we can celebrate the gifts God has given us. And if one song we sing doesn't connect to me, I can't say, well, don't ever sing that because it doesn't speak to me. It's about all of us coming together. But bottom line with this study, what I'm mentioning tonight is that the worship we do needs to be enough to let people know you're welcomed, you're wanted, and we want to help connect you. Okay, we're ready for our fourth and final concept, and that is systems. What in the world am I talking about? Well, I'm in the conference room where we do a lot of planning and leadership as staff and as deacons and committees. Stewardship meets in here, nominating committee meets in here. A lot of things are done. And so I thought of systems when I thought of this room, and Ulu Brown talks about that in his book. What systems are about they're the way we do what we do. It's the systems, the thing that keeps us together, that gets us going. It's the stuff that gets it going. There are people systems. We are the people, and we work together through the processes by which we do church. And there's a formula Ulu Brown mentions where it talks about how a church system has to face the future and how painful it can be. What he said was growth equals change, right? But that change equals loss, because when you change, you got to let go of things, and we don't like to let go. And so loss equals pain, and that means growth is going to equal pain. In order to grow, if you're working out at the gym, there's going to be pain. If you're going to grow your financial account, you have to put money away and sacrifice and give up some things that you'd rather do and spend that money. And so real growth is going to cost us, and that's okay because the result is awesome. So what we got to do when we have volunteers leading, whether it's nominating, the nominating process is going on, they're asking people to do jobs in the church, whether it's leadership, whatever. When someone's asked to do a job in the church, they need a clear expectation of what that job is and what it entails. And so here's some things to consider as a church organizes its leadership and how it's going to function to do the things we do. One is that all people are welcome, yes, but we don't all have the same gifts. So that means not everybody can do every job, plainly put. I can't play the piano. I can sit at those keys and try all day long, but I just can't. So you don't ask me to be the pianist. Someone else may say, don't ask me to serve in the children's ministry. I don't dislike children, but never really been around children. I don't know anything about children, and it's really not a desire of mine to work with children. Then that person doesn't need to work with children. Now, some gifts can be taught. Someone says, I love the Bible. I know a lot about the Bible, but I don't know how to teach. Okay, so we can get you some skill training. Or I'm a great teacher. I teach math maybe, and I've been teaching math for 30 years and never taught the Bible because there are some things I'm not sure I know. Well, maybe that person would need to be in a Bible study program to learn and develop those skills. And by the way, I wouldn't teach math. So plus to the math teacher. But you get what I'm saying. But not everybody can do every job, okay? And we also got to know as we work with volunteers in the church, which, number one, other than the paid staff, that word paid, majority of people, 99% of the jobs are done by unpaid people. And I appreciate you and I thank you at Randolph for all your jobs that you do. I mean, a church can't function. You think about, without volunteers, you think about between services during the COVID, 2 worship services we're doing. So we have a service at 9 and a service at 11, and we clean in between. It takes an army to get all that ready. And even in an ordinary time, to have a worship service, if you had to pay somebody to do all those things, there's no way. And the reason you even pay anybody to start with, this is not me to defend my salary, but the idea of paid ministers is that we can devote all of our time to doing things that you can't do because you have other jobs, but that because God calls all of us, then there are certain jobs reserved that you can do in the time you do have to make this thing work. And so I'm like a coach, training, equipping, enabling, but then it's yours, then you step, you get in and get involved. And because as a coach can't, if the coach plays the other team, one coach against 5 basketball players, it doesn't work. So I'm coaching so that you guys can play. The coach metaphor works to a degree. It also doesn't mean, I always call myself a coach/captain of the team because I'm coaching you so that the 5 people that you're playing isn't just me, it's the team playing. But I'm also like the team captain because I'm on the court with you. I don't believe I'm hiding in my office while you do all the work. So those are some leadership ideas I have. So the pastor or the leader is the coach slash team captain, but we're all in it together. And so as you work with volunteers, not only do we have to get people in the right gifts, let me put it to you this way. There's a great book, not the book I'm talking about, but there's another book called The Energy Bus. And the whole concept of that is that there's a seat on the bus for everybody, but we have to get the right people on the right seat. So not everybody's driving the bus, but everybody's getting in the right spot. And once everybody gets in the right spot, then the bus can go. Okay, so all people can't do everything, but all people can do something. All right, second thing is that people are people. And what I mean that is that yes, we're a church and we're Christians and we're redeemed, but we have, interdynamic relationships. We have to learn how to do communication. Some people are introverts, some people are extroverts, all people, every one of us have our flaws, all of us have our talents, and so people are people. And if you've ever worked with people, church will be no different. We have to learn how to work together and to relate together. And as we're doing this is a lesson for preachers and Sunday school teachers and deacons and other leaders. All of us need to make sure we're taking care of our own spiritual growth. It's not all about me teaching you. We have to take care of our own spiritual growth so that I can teach and lead you. And that's why once a year I go to a festival of preaching, and I have a packed week of lectures and preaching and sermons so that I can teach you better, so that I feel, and sometimes it's not so much that they're telling me things I'm going to tell you, though sometimes that happens, but that I'm getting my needs met and I'm connecting to God my own way, and I'm being filled so that I can help you be filled. This year that didn't happen because of COVID, and so they allowed us to get the 35 lectures and sermons on demand. And so I'm watching a little bit each week and being immersed in that. It's not quite the same, it's just like this, but it is what I need and every leader needs. And there are open and closed systems. There are churches that are very open and they're flexible and they're innovative and they're welcoming, and there are others that are just closed off, not willing to think about new ideas. If we are going to be a church for the future, we've got to be open and ready to take on the challenges of the future. I'll give it to you this way. This is just a tiny, tiny example as we get to the close here, but it fits. Churches that are looking at giving and stewardship. In the old days, you put the money in the plate, and so the only way money came into the church is it's put in the plate, the offering plate. Paid is and it's theological. It's an act of worship. So when the plate is passed, you put your offering in as a gift to God. That's wonderful, and it really worked when people attended worship about 50 times a year, right? But now people attend like 2 times a month, or maybe once a month because of travel, life. Remember I told you people are busy? And so if you only put in the plate then, that becomes a problem. And then with COVID, how are you going to put anything in the plate? Well, through the years, more people have mailed in their offering. And that's fine, that's good. Many of you do that, and we appreciate it. But during COVID, some of you began to drop it off, and we've had some ways for you to do that. And that has been a lifesaver, or the church would have been in trouble. Some of you now, though, are using technology, a direct deposit from your bank, so it comes immediately from your bank account to the church. And others are giving on online giving platforms. Our church has that available. And the truth is, if you ask somebody 25 years old if they have any cash, they'll probably tell you no. If you ask them if they have a checkbook, they'll tell you no, generally. I have a checkbook, but I rarely use it, and I don't carry it with me. And so those of us that are using online bill pay and just online expense and debit and credit cards, we come to worship, the plate is passed, we have nothing on us to give. And so we say, I'll need to go home and dig up a checkbook somewhere and send a check out. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But with an online option where I can set up the bill pay immediately from my bills, so it just comes automatically, or I can send it, we have seen churches where that has increased. Ulu Brown's church, 70% of their giving comes from direct giving, online giving, because they've got a lot of young people and millennials and Generation X, and that's how they give. And so the church of the future has to be willing to do that. But I've heard of some churches where the church leadership just says, no, we don't do that. You can only do it this way. Well, a church that insists just on checks and cash, just in that one little ministry idea, is going to be in trouble. And that's just one example. You can think of other examples. One that insists that the only Bible study can happen during Sunday school. That's it. We have Bible school during Sunday school, Bible study during Sunday school. That's when you do it. Well, maybe somebody can't be here every Sunday, and so they don't ever come to Sunday school. They just go to worship because they don't want to just come to Sunday school every now and then. But then if you had an online class that met during the week or a small group, where it can fit the person's work schedule or the way they live. Those are just examples. Okay, so we've talked about 4 ways a church can be a church. So let me wrap it up. I'm not going to leave this room this time. I'm just going to wrap it up. We got 4. We've got, are you ready? You can remember this. Technology, hospitality, worship, and systems. And the way we have to think about this is to reclaim these 4 vital pieces of the church, to rethink them, think again, and then I'm going to change it a little bit from Ulu Brown's book, but I'm going to say reboot them. That's not quite the language he used. He used the word regenerate, but I'm going to say reboot. I'm going to say reclaim, rethink, and reboot. So I'm borrowing 2/3 of his idea. But reclaim, this is important to, what I mean, let me back up. Reclaim. It is important for us to reclaim that technology is vital to the church. It is important for us to reclaim that hospitality and worship and systems are vital to the church. We're going to claim it again. But we're going to rethink it. Tradition's important if it works and to teach tradition, but we're not going to cling to the past. We're going to take it and allow it to evolve if it needs to, or to let go of some things or to take on new things. But we're going to rethink, what is it? Why did this church do this? And what do we need to do now? And then I'm going to say reboot. I like that word better. We're going to reboot. Well, that was, this was a study based on a book, based on some other ideas of mine. And I hope it was helpful as we wrap up kind of thinking about the church in the 21st century. It's certainly not our last conversation because it can't be, but I hope it gets the juices going. On Wednesdays, my midweek study, I'm going to start thinking about Jonah because that's what the kids are going to study. We just start the idea going, what is about the Jonah story, and we'll do that all the way till August gets here. God bless you, and let's close in prayer. Gracious God, I hope that this study helps those who have participated to think about what it means to be the church, to really wrestle with those ideas, and to rejoice that you are still the God who empowers and engages us all. May we live up to the challenge you've given us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.